When two worlds met. The year was 1925. In the heart of a city that never truly slept, where cobblestone streets curled like ribbons beneath gas lamps' soft glow, and the evening mist blurred the edges of every shadow, two lives were about to intertwine in a way neither expected. Emma was a young woman with dreams as wide as the river that split the city in two. Her days were spent tucked away in a small bookshop nestled between a warm bakery and a tailor shop, surrounded by the comforting scent of aged paper and the quiet rustle of turning pages. She knew every corner of the shop, every book's story, but she longed for a story of her own to unfold beyond those walls. Across the city, James, a thoughtful young man with eyes full of hope, worked in a modest photography studio filled with cameras and prints. He saw the world through his camera lens, capturing fleeting moments others often missed, moments of light and shadow, laughter and silence. One rainy afternoon, as the sky wept gentle tears, Emma closed the bookshop for the day and hurried down the glistening cobblestones, her coat pulled tight against the chill, to catch the last streetcar home. Under a faded awning, shielding himself from the rain, stood James, camera bag slung over his shoulder, waiting for the same streetcar. Their eyes met briefly, a soft smile was exchanged, and in that simple moment, something delicate and profound began to bloom, a quiet beginning to a story that neither would soon forget. As the streetcar rattled to a stop, its old wheels screeching softly against the tracks, Emma stepped on first, the warm glow of the interior wrapping around her like a gentle hug. James followed, his footsteps light but steady, finding a seat not far from hers. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper, the city's noises muffled under the night's thick blanket. Inside, the gentle sway of the streetcar created a peaceful rhythm, a quiet pause between two worlds, the one they were leaving behind and the one still waiting ahead. Emma glanced over and caught James's eye again. This time, her smile held a question, soft and inviting. James nodded slightly as if saying, "Hello," without words. And in that small exchange, a fragile connection was woven. The city outside blurred past the windows, street lamps casting golden pools of light onto wet cobblestones, while inside, two strangers shared a quiet moment suspended in time. Neither spoke much that evening, but the silence was comfortable, filled with the kind of understanding that doesn't need words, a calm space where two souls simply acknowledged each other's presence. As the streetcar rolled on toward their separate stops, neither wanted the moment to end. The rain had slowed to a gentle mist, and the night held its breath, watching as two paths began to weave closer together, a slow dance of fate under the quiet glow of a city that never truly sleeps. The streetcar came to a gentle stop near Emma's neighborhood. She gathered her coat tighter around her, stepping down onto the wet pavement with a soft sigh. James followed shortly after, his footsteps echoing quietly behind her. The streets were quiet now, the city's usual hustle softened by the late hour and lingering mist. Street lamps flickered overhead, casting long shadows that danced gently with the breeze. Emma glanced back, catching James a moment behind her. Their eyes met again, this time with a hint of something deeper. A silent promise of meeting again, though no words were spoken. They walked side by side for a few blocks, the cool night air filling their lungs, each step unhurried, as if time itself had slowed just for them. At a small corner where their paths would soon part, Emma paused, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for sharing the ride." James smiled, his eyes warm with a quiet happiness. "It was my pleasure, Emma." And with that, they parted ways. Two hearts gently touched by a moment of unexpected connection, each carrying the soft glow of that evening into the night. The city breathed around them, alive yet peaceful, holding their secrets softly in the folds of its cobblestone streets and misty air. Days passed slowly in the city, each one carrying the gentle rhythm of life's simple pleasures. Emma continued her days in the little bookshop, where the scent of old pages felt like a comforting embrace. She often found herself glancing out the window, wondering if James might appear again among the crowds. James, too, returned to his photography studio, capturing light and shadows. Yet his thoughts often wandered back to that rainy evening. He thought about the quiet smile, the soft eyes, and the unspoken promise shared on the streetcar. One afternoon, as Emma arranged a display of new books, the door chimed softly. She looked up, and there he was, James, holding a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "I thought you might like this," he said, extending the package with a shy smile. Emma carefully unwrapped it to find a vintage camera, old but beautifully preserved, with delicate engravings on its brass body. "It's a gift," James explained. "For someone who sees stories in pages, I thought you might like to see stories through a lens." Her smile grew warm and bright, and for the first time, the bookshop felt even more like home. In the days that followed, Emma and James found themselves meeting more often. Sometimes in the quiet corners of the bookshop, where the sunlight filtered softly through the dusty windows. Other times along the riverside, where the water whispered gentle secrets and the breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. They shared stories. Emma spoke of her favorite books, tales of distant lands and brave heroes. James showed her photographs he had taken, moments frozen in time, a child's laughter, an old man's smile, the golden light of sunset on the city's rooftops. Their friendship blossomed slowly, like a tender flower opening in the early morning light. No rush, no grand declarations, just two souls discovering a quiet joy in each other's presence. One evening, as the sky painted itself in shades of pink and purple, James took Emma's hand gently in his, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to hold its breath. "Emma," he whispered softly, "I think this is the beginning of something beautiful." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Something slow and steady, like the river," she replied. And so their story continued, a gentle dance of moments, small and meaningful, woven together with care and patience, under the watchful gaze of the city's timeless streets. As the weeks turned into months, the seasons began to change. The warm glow of summer slowly softened into the crisp chill of autumn. Leaves painted in shades of gold and crimson drifted lazily to the cobblestone streets below. Emma and James found themselves wandering beneath the canopy of fiery trees, their footsteps muffled by the carpet of fallen leaves. The city around them hummed quietly with the gentle pace of life, and in those moments the world felt calm and full of promise. One afternoon, James brought his camera to capture the autumn light. He showed Emma how to hold the lens, how to look for the small details, the way sunlight kissed the edges of a leaf, or how shadows played on the bark of an old tree. Emma laughed softly as she peered through the viewfinder, feeling a new world open before her eyes. Their days were filled with these small discoveries, quiet conversations over cups of tea, shared smiles in the soft light of dusk, and the steady, comforting presence of one another. Though the city was vast and full of life, for Emma and James it had become a world all their own, a place where love grew slowly like the gentle turning of the seasons, steady and sure, whispered on the breeze. As autumn deepened, the days grew shorter, and the city took on a softer, quieter mood. The streets, once busy with lively chatter, now carried the peaceful hush of fading light. One chilly evening, Emma wrapped herself in a woolen shawl and stepped outside, drawn by the gentle glow of lanterns lining the narrow alleys. James was waiting by the riverside, his camera ready, but forgotten at his side. Together, they walked along the water's edge, the cool air filled with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. The city lights reflected softly on the rippling surface, creating a dance of shimmering gold and silver. They paused beneath an ancient stone bridge, its arches casting gentle shadows in the twilight. James reached out, taking Emma's hand in his once more, and in the quiet stillness, their hearts spoke without words. No grand declarations were needed here, just the simple truth of shared moments, and the steady warmth growing between them, like the steady flame of a candle flickering softly against the night. And as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Emma and James stood together, wrapped in the calm embrace of the city's gentle night. Winter whispered its arrival softly, blanketing the city in quiet white. The cobblestone streets were dusted with snow, and the air held a crisp, refreshing chill. Emma's bookshop glowed warmly from within, its windows fogged gently from the heat. James often visited, bringing with him stories captured in his photographs. Frozen moments of laughter, twinkling lights, and snowy afternoons. One evening, as snowflakes drifted lazily outside, James invited Emma to join him for a walk through the city's winter market. Stalls lined the square, glowing with strings of lights, and the scent of spiced cider and baked goods filled the air. They wandered slowly, hand in hand, sharing quiet smiles and stolen glances wrapped in scarves in the soft glow of lanterns. At the heart of the market stood a tall pine tree, decorated with simple ornaments and glowing softly under the night sky. James turned to Emma, his breath visible in the cold air, and whispered, "This feels like a perfect moment." Emma smiled, her eyes shining bright. "Moments like these," she replied softly, "are the ones we carry with us." And so, surrounded by the peaceful beauty of winter, their love grew quietly, like the steady falling of snow, soft, gentle, and unending. As winter deepened, the city slowed down even more. The cold days invited moments of quiet reflection, where the world seemed wrapped in a soft white blanket. One evening, after the snow had fallen gently all day, Emma and James found themselves sitting by the fire in her cozy little bookshop. The warm glow flickered softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls lined with books. They spoke in whispers, sharing stories of their childhoods and dreams for the future. James showed Emma some of his favorite photographs, images captured long ago but still alive with emotion and light. Outside, the wind sighed softly, rustling the branches of bare trees, while inside, the gentle crackle of the fire filled the space with comfort. In that peaceful moment, surrounded by warmth and soft light, Emma leaned her head gently on James's shoulder. No words were needed to say what was in their hearts, only the steady rhythm of two souls finding home in each other. And as sleep began to call softly, the world outside faded away, leaving only the quiet promise of a love growing gently, steady as the falling snow. Spring whispered softly into the city, and with it came the tender promise of new beginnings. The snow melted slowly, revealing the first brave shoots of green pushing through the earth. Emma's bookshop blossomed with fresh blooms, delicate lilacs and daffodils brightening the windowsill. The city's cobblestone streets began to hum again with the quiet footsteps of morning wanderers. James found new inspiration in the soft light of spring, capturing the world awakening from its winter slumber. He and Emma spent gentle afternoons wandering through blooming gardens, sharing dreams beneath a canopy of flowering trees. One afternoon, as cherry blossoms drifted like pink snow around them, James took Emma's hand and led her to a quiet bench tucked beneath an ancient oak. He looked into her eyes, calm and clear as a spring sky, and whispered, "I want to walk beside you through every season." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with a peaceful joy. "There's no place I'd rather be," she replied softly. And so beneath the soft petals, falling like whispers from above, their story continued, a slow, steady unfolding of love, woven gently through the changing seasons. Spring had settled softly over the city like a gentle sigh. The chill of winter had melted away, replaced by tender warmth that seemed to seep into every corner. From the narrow cobblestone streets to the small parks where children's laughter now echoed. Emma's bookshop, once quiet and reserved through the cold months, now blossomed with life. Fresh flowers sat in delicate vases on the windowsill, daffodils with bright yellow heads, pale lilacs with their sweet scent drifting softly through the air. The pages of the books inside seemed to glow in the sunlight streaming through the windows, casting golden patterns on the wooden floor. James found himself drawn more and more to the moments that seemed small but full of meaning. He carried his camera everywhere, capturing the delicate unfolding of spring, the way sunlight danced on the water's surface, the shy bloom of a tulip, the flutter of wings as birds returned to their nests. On many afternoons, Emma and James would meet near the riverbank, where the gentle current whispered ancient stories as it flowed steadily onward. They walked slowly along the edge, sharing dreams and quiet laughter, their hands brushing sometimes, tentative but full of unspoken warmth. One such afternoon, the air was filled with the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers. Cherry blossoms hung heavily on the branches above, their pale pink petals drifting down like soft snowflakes in the gentle breeze. Emma reached out, catching a petal between her fingers, her eyes shining with a calm happiness. James smiled, raising his camera and snapping a photo, not just of the blossoms, but of Emma herself, her face lit softly by the fading sunlight, a picture that captured the quiet magic of the moment perfectly. They settled on a bench beneath an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching wide like welcoming arms. James turned to Emma, his voice low and steady. "I want to walk beside you through every season, through every change and every quiet moment." Emma's heart beat gently, steady and sure, and she replied with a soft smile, "There's no place I'd rather be." For a long while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sun dipped slowly below the horizon, painting the sky with soft hues of lavender and gold. The city around them grew still, wrapped in the peaceful hush of evening, and in that calm, gentle space their story continued, a slow and steady unfolding, like the quiet turning of the seasons, woven softly into the fabric of time itself. The gentle hum of spring carried through the city like a soft melody. Morning light spilled lazily over rooftops, casting long shadows that slowly shortened as the day awakened. Emma rose early, the soft creak of her wooden floorboards the only sound in the quiet house. She dressed carefully in a simple dress of pale blue, the fabric brushing gently against her skin. Her fingers lingered on the windowsill where fresh lilacs bloomed, their sweet scent a promise of new beginnings. Today was a day for wandering, for discovery, for the gentle unfolding of something tender and true. James was already waiting near the bookshop, his camera case slung casually over one shoulder. His eyes brightened as he saw her approach, and in that moment the noisy city seemed to fade away, leaving only the soft connection between two hearts finding their rhythm. They walked side by side through the winding streets, the cobblestones warm beneath their feet from the morning sun. The air was alive with the scent of freshly baked bread from the bakery and the distant laughter of children chasing each other through the park. Emma paused to point out a small patch of wildflowers pushing through a crack in the stone, their colors vivid against the gray, a quiet testament to resilience and hope. James knelt beside them, lowering his camera slowly, capturing the fragile beauty with a tender care that made Emma smile. They wandered toward the river next, the water shimmering like glass beneath the soft blue sky. A gentle breeze stirred the branches of willow trees, their slender leaves brushing the surface of the water with delicate ripples. Here, away from the bustle of the city, their words came softer, more honest. Emma spoke of stories she longed to write, of places she dreamed to visit, and James shared his vision of capturing the unseen beauty in everyday life. Time slipped quietly away as they talked, their hands occasionally brushing, each touch a spark in the gentle unfolding of their shared story. As afternoon waned, James led Emma to a small cafe tucked away down a side street, its wooden tables worn smooth by years of use, and its windows glowing warmly in the fading light. Over cups of steaming tea, they watched the city slow to a peaceful pause, the sky shifting to soft hues of pink and gold. The moment stretched between them, not hurried, not forced, but perfectly still, as if the world itself was holding its breath for them. When evening finally settled, Emma wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders, and James offered his arm as they walked back through the quiet streets. Beneath the gas lamp's flickering glow, their smiles grew gentle and full of promise, a slow dance of two souls stepping carefully into the future, hand in hand, heart to heart. As twilight deepened, the city began to soften into shades of dusky rose and muted lavender. The cobblestone streets, once bustling with the day's energy, now hummed quietly beneath the soft footsteps of evening wanderers. Emma and James moved slowly, savoring the peaceful calm that settled around them like a gentle blanket. The cool air carried the faint scent of jasmine from a nearby garden, mingling with the warm aroma of freshly baked bread drifting from an open bakery door. They paused beneath an old wrought-iron street lamp, its glow casting a golden pool of light on the stones beneath their feet. James adjusted the strap of his camera bag and smiled softly at Emma, who tucked a stray curl behind her ear with a shy laugh. "The city feels different at this hour," Emma whispered, her voice almost lost in the soft rustling of leaves overhead. "It's as if everything has slowed down, just enough for us to catch our breath." James nodded, his eyes reflecting the warm light. It's in these quiet moments that the world reveals its truest colors. They continued walking, their steps falling into a gentle rhythm. The distant murmur of a piano drifted from a nearby cafe, notes weaving through the evening air like a delicate thread. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over her, wrapping her in a soothing embrace. As they reached the edge of a small park, James took Emma's hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. The park was a sanctuary of shadows and soft light, the trees standing tall like silent guardians of the night. They found a bench nestled beneath a blooming magnolia tree, petals falling around them like soft snow. Sitting close, they shared stories, whispers of hopes, memories of childhood dreams, and quiet promises for the future. The world outside the park faded away, leaving only the steady beating of two hearts, a slow, steady song of connection and comfort. James lifted his camera once more, but instead of taking a photograph, he simply held it in his lap, choosing to preserve the moment in memory alone. A gentle snapshot of time shared beneath the soft glow of the city's night. Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth and steady presence that had become her anchor in this ever-changing world. The stars blinked softly overhead, and as a cool breeze stirred the petals at their feet, they closed their eyes, letting the quiet night lull them into peaceful rest. The days grew longer and warmer as spring stretched gently into early summer. The city, once cloaked in mist and soft shadows, now shimmered with golden light. Sunbeams filtered through the leaves, casting playful patterns on the sidewalks where Emma and James wandered side by side. Emma loved these quiet mornings, when the world was just waking and everything felt possible. The scent of fresh bread from the bakery mingled with the soft perfume of blooming roses and honeysuckle spilling from garden fences. She held a small bouquet of wildflowers, their colors vivid against the soft fabric of her dress. James carried his camera as always, but sometimes he would lower it just to watch Emma, the way her eyes sparkled with quiet wonder, the gentle curve of her smile that made his heart steady and sure. One particular morning, they found themselves near the old clock tower, its hands moving slowly, marking the steady passage of time that seemed both fleeting and eternal. They sat on a nearby bench, watching the city come alive in the golden light. James spoke softly about his dreams, capturing moments not just in photographs, but in memories, creating a legacy of quiet beauty in a world that often rushed too fast. Emma listened, her heart swelling with the calm certainty that this was a journey worth taking together. They wandered through a bustling market, stalls bright with fresh fruits and vibrant fabrics. The laughter of children playing nearby mingled with the gentle chatter of neighbors greeting one another. James snapped pictures of sunflowers turning their faces toward the sun, of a little girl chasing a butterfly, and occasionally of Emma, caught in the gentle glow of the morning. Later, as afternoon light softened, they found a quiet cafe shaded by a canopy of ivy. Over steaming cups of tea, they shared stories of their pasts, stories filled with hopes, losses, and quiet resilience. Each word wove them closer, stitching a tapestry of trust and tenderness between their hearts. The city around them buzzed softly with life, But within the cozy corner they occupied, time seemed to slow, allowing moments to stretch and settle like gentle waves. As evening fell, they strolled slowly back toward the river, where lanterns flickered on boats moored along the shore. The water reflected the twinkling lights like a sea of stars, shimmering just beneath the surface. James took Emma's hand, his touch steady and warm. Under the canopy of night, with the soft murmur of the river at their side, they spoke no word, for none were needed. Their hearts, quietly and surely, spoke for them both. And as the city settled into peaceful night, Emma and James stood together, wrapped in the soft embrace of love's slow, steady bloom. The days had grown long, golden with the promise of summer. Mornings arrived gently, carried in on the soft hush of birdsong and the scent of roses blooming along the wrought iron balconies. The city, once cloaked in mist and cobblestone quiet, now shimmered with warmth, its heart beating slowly, rhythmically, like a waltz in the afternoon light. Emma stood behind the counter of her little bookshop, the front door propped open to let in the breeze. She wore a light cotton dress today, patterned with tiny violets, and a faint smile that hadn't left her face in days. The shop was quieter than usual, not for lack of visitors, but because her mind was elsewhere. Every so often, her fingers would pause between sorting books, and her gaze would drift toward the window. Not in waiting, not anymore, because now she knew James would come. And he did. Just after noon, the familiar jingle of the bell above the door announced his arrival. James stepped inside, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, his dark hair slightly tousled by the breeze. He carried a bundle wrapped in linen, bread from the bakery next door and 2 peaches, their scent sweet and summery. "I thought we could steal the afternoon," he said, a quiet warmth in his voice. Emma laughed softly. "I think the afternoon would like that very much." Packed a small basket, 2 books, the bread, the peaches, and a worn checkered blanket. The walk to the park took them along the riverside again, now dappled in sunlight and laughter. Children chased each other beneath trees heavy with green, and the water sparkled like melted gold. They found a quiet spot beneath an old chestnut tree whose roots curled like fingers into the grass. Spreading out the blanket, they settled into a comfortable stillness, one that didn't need to be filled with words. James passed her half a peach, the juice running down his fingers. Emma bit into hers and smiled, eyes closed, letting the sweetness linger. "I used to think I'd find stories only in books," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "But now I see them everywhere, even in the way you peel a peach." James chuckled, wiping his hands on a handkerchief. "I think life was waiting for you to look up." The sun moved lazily across the sky, the afternoon unfolding like a page slowly turned. After the food was gone and the basket sat forgotten, Emma leaned against James's shoulder. He held her hand loosely, fingers intertwined. The warmth between them was no longer new. It had become a part of them, like the rhythm of breath. James reached for his camera, but didn't lift it. He looked at her and said quietly, "I don't think I'll ever take a photo that feels as real as this." Emma turned to him, her expression soft and sure. "Then maybe you don't have to capture it. Maybe we just live it." And so they did, letting the golden afternoon stretch on without end, 2 hearts resting gently in the quiet joy of a love that didn't need to be rushed or proven, only felt and lived. When 2 worlds met, part a letter never sent. It was late afternoon when James found himself standing alone in his studio, the soft hum of the ceiling fan spinning above breaking the silence. Outside, the summer light filtered in through the lace curtains, painting moving shadows across the wooden floor. He was sorting through an old box of photographs, prints he hadn't touched in years. Dust clung to the edges of each frame, and time had left its gentle fingerprints on every surface. Beneath a stack of forgotten images, he found a sealed envelope, its edges slightly curled. His breath caught. He knew this envelope. He had written it years ago, in a different time, to someone who never received it, his older brother Thomas. Thomas had left for the war in 1917, full of fire and belief in something larger than himself. He never returned. James had only been a boy then, barely old enough to understand grief, but old enough to feel its silence stretch across the dinner table every night. The letter had been his way of saying goodbye, words he could never say aloud. Hands trembling slightly, he opened the envelope for the first time in over a decade. The paper inside had yellowed gently, the ink slightly faded. I miss you. I don't understand why you had to go. I look for you in the faces of people on the street. I hope you see the world I see through my lens. Maybe then you'd know I'm trying. I'm trying to carry the light. James sat down quietly, the letter in his lap, his heart full and quiet. That evening, he didn't go to the riverside with his camera. He went to the bookshop. Emma was closing up, the key just turning in the lock when she saw him across the street. His eyes soft, far away like he'd walked out of a different time. Without a word, she unlocked the door again. Inside, they sat on the old velvet settee near the poetry shelf. He handed her the letter. Emma read it in silence, her fingers tracing the fragile edges. When she finished, she didn't speak. She simply placed her hand over his, warm, grounding, steady. And in that moment, James felt something unspoken release, a weight he didn't know he'd been carrying for years. I never told anyone, he said quietly. I didn't think anyone would want to hear. Emma's voice was soft as the turning of a page. I want to hear every part of your story, James, even the quiet ones. Outside, the city glowed under the fading light, but inside, between dust and books and two steady hearts, a new chapter quietly began. One where love wasn't just in the laughter and the shared glances, but in the sorrow, in the healing, in the courage to hand someone your unfinished pages. When two worlds met, part the space between words. The heat of summer settled like a soft shawl over the city, slowing its rhythm to a gentle pulse. In the bookshop, fans whirred quietly and the scent of lavender sachets mixed with the warm aroma of old pages. Emma stood behind the counter, a small book in her hands. Poetry, something quiet, something familiar. But her mind wasn't in the pages. James hadn't come by in 2 days. It wasn't long, not really. They weren't bound by obligation or promises. And yet a subtle ache had crept in, not of anger, but of wondering. Did she say too much? Did he share too much and now feel exposed? Or perhaps, was she reading too far into something that was never meant to be so deep? She pushed the thoughts aside, trying to focus. But when the bell above the door chimed at last, her heart lifted, only to pause again. James entered, but not with the easy grace she'd come to recognize. He looked tired, distracted, his shirt wrinkled, his camera missing from its usual place. Hi, he said, his voice softer than usual. Emma smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Everything all right? James hesitated, then nodded. Just been thinking. Got caught up in some work. Emma turned back toward the shelf, her hands fussing with a row of titles that didn't need straightening. A silence fell, not the warm, shared kind they'd grown used to, but a cooler one edged with uncertainty. She didn't ask him what he'd been thinking about, and he didn't say. Later, as they sat in the reading corner with tea between them, the conversation never quite found its rhythm. James spoke of an upcoming gallery exhibit, his tone almost rehearsed. Emma responded politely, but her thoughts wandered. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even a disagreement. It was a space, quiet and unintended, that had opened between them, like two pages that hadn't yet turned. When James finally rose to leave, Emma walked him to the door. He paused, his hand on the handle. I'll come by tomorrow, he said, almost as if asking for permission. Emma nodded. Okay. And then, as the door closed softly behind him, She leaned against it, wondering if love always moved in such gentle, uncertain steps, forward, then sideways, then still. Outside, the summer sky deepened into dusk. The city lights flickered one by one, and somewhere in the quiet folds of the evening, two hearts sat quietly, waiting for the right words to find them again. When two worlds met, part the window of honesty. The next morning came with the scent of rain still clinging to the air. The streets were damp, their cobblestones slick and dark, and the sky hung low, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Emma arrived early at the bookshop. She hadn't slept well. James's quiet distance the day before still echoed in her chest, not loud but present, like a half-remembered song. She brewed a pot of tea, laid out 2 cups, and waited. Not anxiously, just open. The bell rang at precisely 10 past 10. James stepped in, this time with the familiar weight of his camera over his shoulder. But his eyes told the truth. He had something to say. "I didn't mean to disappear," he said before she could even greet him. Emma offered a small smile, one filled with more kindness than confusion. "I know." He stepped closer, removing the camera, placing it gently on the counter. "I needed space. Not from you," he paused, "but from the noise in my own head." She nodded, encouraging without interrupting. "I think," he continued, his voice soft, "I got scared. Not because of anything you did, but because what's growing between us, it feels real. And real things sometimes remind me of what I lost." Emma stepped around the counter slowly, her steps light, steady. "We don't have to name it," she said gently. "Not today. But I'd rather you bring your silence to me than take it somewhere else." James's eyes softened, and for the first time in days, his shoulders relaxed. "I don't want to pull away," he admitted. "I just needed to remember that being vulnerable doesn't mean being alone again." Emma reached for his hand, not to hold it tightly, but just to touch lightly. "I'm still here," she whispered, even in the quiet. They stood like that for a moment, hands barely touching, the world narrowing to the sound of rain tapping softly against the shop window. Outside, the gray sky began to lift. The light crept slowly through the glass, illuminating the dust motes in the air, tiny stars suspended. James smiled, not wide but full, and looked down at their hands. "Would you come with me this afternoon?" he asked. "There's a place I go when I need to remember who I am." Emma tilted her head, her smile gentle. "Lead the way." When two worlds met, part the garden behind the gate. That afternoon, the sky hung in a pale hush. Clouds stretched like linen across the blue, the air thick with the smell of earth after rain. James led Emma away from the familiar paths of the city. They walked in silence, not out of distance, but out of comfort. The kind that comes when two people no longer feel the need to fill every space with words. He took her to the edge of an old neighborhood, quiet and half-forgotten. Brick houses leaned gently with age, vines curling around weathered windows. They turned down a narrow alley, barely wide enough for two, and stopped at an iron gate. Behind it lay a hidden garden, wild and overgrown, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Emma's breath caught. Roses bloomed in tangled corners. Lavender spilled across broken stones. At the center stood a wooden bench, aged to silver with time. The air was thick with the hum of bees, the flutter of wings, the whisper of leaves. James pushed open the gate with a soft creak. "My mother planted this," he said quietly. "Years ago, after Thomas left for the war, she came here almost every day. When she couldn't talk about what she was feeling, she came here and grew it instead." Emma stepped gently onto the path, brushing her fingers along the lavender. "And after she passed, I kept coming," James continued. "Not to fix anything, just to remember her hands in the soil, to feel close to something that didn't leave." They reached the bench. Emma sat, the old wood warm from the afternoon sun. James didn't sit right away. He walked a few steps ahead and turned around, his voice low. "I brought you here because this is the most honest place I know." Emma looked up at him, her eyes soft. I've never seen anything like it, she said. James finally sat beside her. There's something I've been thinking, he said after a long pause. When I take pictures, I try to capture something no one sees. But with you, I think I've stopped hiding behind the lens. Emma's reply was almost a whisper. You don't have to hide with me. He looked at her then, really looked. And in the wild quiet of that secret garden, he took her hands slowly, as if asking without asking. Emma didn't pull away. They sat there for a long time, no promises made, no questions asked. Just two hearts resting in the soft language of presence. A petal drifted down from a nearby tree and landed between them. James looked at it and smiled. Maybe this is how it begins. Not with a grand gesture, just with choosing each other. Again and again. Emma nodded. Every day, she said, quietly but clearly. And in that garden, behind the iron gate, under the hush of leaves and the memory of hands that once sowed love into the earth, a new kind of love quietly bloomed. When two worlds met, part, a book of light and quiet things. The idea came quietly. They were sitting on the floor of the bookshop one late afternoon, surrounded by open books, pages fluttering in the breeze from the back window. James had just shown Emma a photo, a black and white shot of a child peering out from behind a rain-streaked window. It held something raw, something unfinished. Emma stared at it for a long time, then softly whispered a few lines. The world behind glass waits to be touched, but remains distant, like memory. James looked at her, his voice almost caught. You just wrote that? Now? Emma shrugged, half shy. It came to me when I saw the picture. They were silent for a moment, the kind of silence where a door opens somewhere inside your chest. Then James said it. What if we made something together? Emma blinked. Like what? He spread the photo out beside the others. I have all these images, moments, pieces. And you write what I've never been able to say about them. Emma sat quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of one photo. A riverbank, an empty bench, a shadow stretching long in golden light. A book, she said slowly. Not just a book, a quiet book. For people who feel too much, but speak too little. James smiled. Yes, for people like us. From that moment, the idea took root. They started slowly, one photograph, one page, one line at a time. Emma's words flowed like light through James's images, and the result felt like a conversation between two hearts that had always known each other, even before they met. They worked in the back of the shop in the early mornings, and sometimes late into the evening, surrounded by stacks of photos, scribbled notes, cups of tea gone cold. They laughed often, leaned over the same notebook, sometimes brushed hands and let them stay. They didn't rush. That was the rule. Just like their love, the book would unfold gently. One image, one line, one honest breath at a time. When two worlds met, part the offer. The book had no title yet, just pages, quiet, beautiful pages. James's photographs captured light in a way words never could. Emma's poems held silence in a way photographs never dared. Together, our pages breathed as if the book itself had a heartbeat. One rainy afternoon, as the city softened behind streaked windows, Emma sat behind the counter, brushing a soft cloth over a worn leather-bound draft of their work. The bell chimed, not the usual gentle jingle, but a crisp, purposeful chime. A woman stepped inside, early 30s, umbrella folded, hair damp from rain, eyes curious. She introduced herself simply. Clara Hill. I work with June Bright Press. Small publisher, mostly poetry and art books. A friend of mine told me about this place, and about you two. James had come in from the back just in time to hear that last part. Clara continued, her eyes scanning the walls. Some of James's prints hung quietly between the shelves. I was hoping to talk about that book you're making, she said, nodding to the leather folder on the counter. Emma hesitated. Her fingers rested protectively on the edge of the draft. James watched her carefully. Clara smiled, sensing the tension. Just to be clear, I'm not here to push. I only want to say it's rare. What you've made, it speaks with a kind of honesty that's quietly brave. If you ever wanted to share it, even in a small print run, we'd be honored. And with that, she handed over her card, nodded politely and left, like a breeze that enters, shifts something, and moves on. The shop was quiet again. Emma didn't speak at first. James leaned on the counter, his voice gentle. You okay? Emma gave a slow nod. Yes, just surprised. James picked up the card, turned it in his hand. I didn't expect it to happen, he said. But I think part of me hopes someone would feel what we feel. Emma looked down at the pages again. The poetry, the photos, the soul inside them. It's not that I don't want others to see it, she said softly. It's just this book feels like us, like the way we fell in love. Quietly, slowly, without noise. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. I know, he said. I don't want to lose that quiet either. They stood in silence, the rain whispering against the windows. Finally, Emma looked up. Let's think about it. No rush. Whether or not we share it, I want the choice to come from us. Together. James reached across the counter, took her hand. As always. And in that simple promise, not to be rushed, not to be pulled, they found their answer wasn't urgent. The book could wait. Their story was still unfolding. When two worlds met, part a book made by hand, they decided not to wait for anyone else to give them permission. Not a publisher, not the world. The book was theirs, born of shared quiet, of morning light, of hands that had slowly learned to trust. So they made it themselves. They chose thick paper with a soft grain, the kind that invited fingers to linger. James printed each photograph in his studio, adjusting the tones until they whispered just enough. Emma wrote the poems by hand first, then typed them slowly on a vintage typewriter, the keys clicking like old rain on tin roofs. They bound the pages with thin leather and wax thread, stitched by lamplight at the back of the shop. Each copy took hours. They made only 12, one for Emma, one for James, one for the bookshop or a quiet secret between the novels, and the rest, for people who had once given them light in small, steady ways. They called the book Light Between Us. No author name, no bio, no price, just a note on the first page. This is not a story. It's a way of remembering how it felt to see each other clearly and still stay. On the last page, Emma wrote, "If you find this, it was meant to find you." They gave the first copy to an old man who used to bring Emma wildflowers every Sunday, always saying, "You remind me of someone I once loved." Another went to the bakery lady who never asked questions, but always gave them warm bread and a kind smile. One evening, they left a copy on the bench under the magnolia tree, where they had once sat in silence and promised nothing, except presence. The city didn't know about the book. There was no launch, no article, no noise. But here and there, a few people held it quietly in their hands, and something in them stilled, like wind settling on still water. Emma and James never cared for fame. They cared for truth, for slowness, for love that stayed quiet and stayed long. And in that quiet, their story lived on. Not in headlines, but in hands. Light between us, gentle ending. Years passed, and the little bookshop that Emma and James had opened became a quiet sanctuary. People came and went, some just to look at the bookshelves, some to sit in the corner and read a page or two from Light Between Us. The book, once so fragile and secret, now had worn edges and softened pages from many hands. Emma often found herself watching strangers pause, their eyes softening, as if the book whispered something only they could hear. James kept making photographs, capturing small moments, raindrops on leaves, children's laughter in the park, the way light spilled through the windows at dawn. They never published another book, but their story lived on, folded into the hearts of those who took the time to look and listen. Sometimes on slow evenings, Emma and James would sit under the magnolia tree, sharing quiet smiles and the comfort of simply being. No grand words were needed, because love, the kind that stays, speaks best in silence.